It's like, that feeling you get when something huge goes down and everybody's just kind of waiting to see what happens next.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at with this whole Mike Jeffries arrest.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely sending shockwaves, and not the kind Jeffries is used to, I'd imagine.
No, not at all.
This isn't just about, some former CEO facing some charges. It feels bigger, like it could unravel this whole system that's maybe been going on for, like, who knows how long.
And by system, we're talking about some incredibly heavy stuff.
Right.
I mean, we're talking sex trafficking, interstate prostitution, all this stemming from his time running Abercrombie and Fitch. We've got these 3 articles from The Independent, and they all basically lay out the same story. And let me tell you, it is a wild ride.
Yeah. And the fact that they are essentially identical is interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, it tells you this is all unfolding super fast. Like, The Independent is just trying to get the information out there as quickly as possible.
Right.
But on the other hand, it also kind of highlights how we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions at this point,
Oh, for sure.
The charges are serious, no doubt. But Jeffries, his partner Matthew Smith, and this alleged middleman, James Jameson, they've all pleaded not guilty.
Right, they have. But even with the denials, just the accusations alone, you know what I mean? It's a lot. The indictment basically describes this casting couch system that was global.
Global, yeah.
And that term gets thrown around, but what are we actually talking about here?
Okay, so picture this. You've got these young guys, right? New to the modeling world, eager to make it big. They're dazzled by the promise of photo shoots, runway shows, all that. And Abercrombie and Fitch, I mean, that's a huge name.
Oh, yeah, huge name.
So they're all in. But then imagine being told that to get all of that, to even get your foot in the door, there's a price. And that price, compliance, that's essentially what this casting couch system implies. People in powerful positions leveraging that power to pressure others into sexual acts for career advancement.
And that's where this David Bradbury story comes in. Chill.
So his account, it's really disturbing.
It's awful.
Bradbury, he was an Abercrombie and Fitch model, and he's alleging that he was told point blank that if he wanted to meet Jeffries, a meeting that could have launched his career, he had to engage in sexual acts with this middleman, James Jameson.
It's like something you'd see in a movie. It's hard to believe this is real life.
Right. But it gets worse. Bradbury claims he was later invited to Jeffries' mansion in the Hamptons and pressured into sex with Jeffries himself. The power dynamic there, I mean, it's hard to even comprehend.
Yeah. And then there's that quote from Bradbury. He said, it was like he was selling fame, and the price was compliance. That one really got to me.
It's chilling. It gets at the heart of why these allegations are so disturbing. It suggests this intentional manipulation of someone's aspirations, of their vulnerability. And because this alleged system went beyond state lines, that's where the interstate prostitution charges come in. This wasn't just happening in one place. This was potentially a whole network from New York to London and beyond.
It really makes you question everything you think you know about this glamorous world of fashion. Like we're getting a glimpse into this dark underbelly. But before we get too far down that road, there's something else that really jumped out at me. Abercrombie and Fitch's response.
It's very calculated, isn't it? Especially considering Jeffries hasn't been associated with them for almost 10 years.
Right.
It's like they're going to great lengths to distance themselves.
Okay, so let's hear it. What exactly are they saying, and what could it mean for this whole case going forward?
It's a tightrope they're walking, for sure. They're acknowledging how serious these allegations are, but at the same time trying to separate themselves from Jeffries. Like, whatever he did, that's not us.
Right. So they're really playing up these changes in leadership and company culture over the past decade. It all feels very deliberate, like it's part of some legal strategy to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. They're basically saying, hey, that was a different time, a different Abercrombie and Fitch, trying to reassure everyone, investors, customers, that they've changed their values.
And they make sure to emphasize their zero tolerance for abuse, harassment, or discrimination. Almost like they're directly countering what these allegations are suggesting.
Exactly. It's all about controlling the narrative. But here's the thing. If you go back to Bradbury's lawsuit, it claims that Abercrombie and Fitch knew, or at least had heard rumors about Jeffries' behavior when he was CEO.
Oh, wow. So they knew.
That's what Bradbury claims. And that just adds a whole other layer to all this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Because if it goes to trial, that becomes a key question. Did they know and do nothing?
Right. Did Abercrombie and Fitch as a company ignore what was going on? Did they fail to create a culture where people felt safe speaking out? That's something a jury might have to decide.
And makes you think about corporate responsibility more broadly. Like, how far up does accountability really go? Is it enough for a company to just say, Oh, we're different now. Or do they have a bigger responsibility to address the harm that happened under their watch, even if it was a different time, a different leader?
And what about the money Jeffries walked away with, a $26 million retirement package back in 2014? If they knew about these allegations and still paid him that, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. It almost feels like they're trying to buy their way out of being held accountable for what happened under Jeffrey's leadership.
It does a bit, doesn't it?
It does. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about the alleged operation itself. The articles mention it spanned multiple continents: New York, London, even Marrakesh. That takes some serious planning and coordination.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just a few isolated things happening here and there. The indictment describes a deliberate and organized effort to target and exploit these young men. And the fact that they allegedly used things like free clothes, gift cards, promises of career advancement to lure them in, that's just another level of manipulation.
Right. It's like they were dangling these dreams in front of these guys, knowing how badly they wanted it, and then
Yeah.
allegedly using that to their advantage.
It's a classic power dynamic that we see a lot in these industries, fashion, entertainment. There's this allure, this promise of fame and fortune that can be really intoxicating, especially when you're young and ambitious and just starting out. And that can lead to situations where individuals feel pressured to do things they wouldn't normally do just to get ahead.
To self-fame, as Bradbury put
Yeah.
it. And it makes me wonder, how do we change that? How do we create a culture where people feel empowered to say no, to walk away from those situations without risking their dreams?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's about changing the entire power structure, creating an environment where people feel safe speaking up, reporting abuse, putting their well-being first without fear of retaliation or destroying their careers.
And that change needs to happen on multiple levels, right? It's not just about individuals feeling brave enough to speak up, but also having the systems in place to support them when they do. It's like we're at this turning point, and not just in fashion, but everywhere. People are finally saying enough is enough, you know?
Mhm.
Like they're not going to stay silent about abuse anymore, no matter who it is, no matter how much time has passed.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing. It's like we're actually making progress, moving towards a place where victims can come forward and actually be heard.
Right. Because it makes you wonder, for every David Bradbury who's brave enough to speak out, how many others are out there? How many people are holding on to these experiences, suffering in silence?
It's got to be so hard to speak up against someone like Jeffries, especially when you think about the potential backlash.
Exactly.
And, it makes you think about what we can do as a society to encourage those voices, to make sure they're not just heard, but believed and supported.
Yeah, it's about changing the whole narrative, right? Instead of this culture of silence and fear, creating a culture of transparency where people are held accountable.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Creating systems where coming forward isn't this terrifying thing, where people know their claims will be taken seriously, investigated properly, and that real action will be taken.
And recognizing that these power dynamics, they aren't limited to one industry.
No, not at all. It's not just fashion or entertainment. It's any field where people are striving for success, and there are those who will exploit that.
So where do we go from here? What are the concrete steps we can take, individually and together, to actually make a difference?
Well, I think on a personal level, it starts with being an ally, listening to survivors, leaving them, and calling out those who abuse their power.
Right.
And then on a larger scale, it's about demanding transparency, holding corporations accountable for creating safe environments for everyone, pushing for laws that protect people from this kind of exploitation.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We see the success, the glamour, but underneath it all, there can be this much darker reality. These allegations against Mike Jeffries, whether they're proven or not, they force us to look at how power can be abused and the urgent need for real change.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we all have a part to play in making the world a safer, more respectful place where everyone can go after their dreams without having to compromise who they are.
This case, it's far from over, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it. But for everyone listening, this conversation, it doesn't end here. Think about what you can do in your own life, in your own work, to make things better, safer, and more equitable for everyone. It's on all of us.